This is Andrew Smiley, Executive Director of Tree Folks. I'm proud to say that this video is brought to you by the Central Texas Regional Mobility Authority, delivering innovative multimodal transportation solutions by engaging the communities we serve and protecting the environment we all share. To learn more, please visit mobilityauthority.com.
So my name is Colin McMichael. I am the Education Coordinator at Tree Folks. Thank you all for coming to our first artistry workshop. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ann. So, ready?
Hi, I'm Ann. I'm going to go over a few Zoom rules to start. If I get cut off, I'll get back on as soon as possible, so please just be patient. If you get cut off, just re-log on as soon as you can. We'll have this recorded and we'll have an outline of this, so if you miss something, you can find it afterward. A few little logistical things. Notice if you scroll over your screen, it'll bring up the control panel at the bottom. Note that your mute button is on the lower left corner. Note that the chat button is sort of down in the middle with a little chat bubble above it, in case you want to participate with a question that way. Reactions, that's how we're going to also encourage participation. If you want to respond to a question, use a reaction, and we'll see your name pop up and then we'll call on you, and then you'll unmute yourself to participate. And I think those are all the main controls we're using. So that's that. I want to introduce Tree Folks. Most of you know who Tree Folks are. They're one of the long-standing tree organizations in Austin. They've been around 30 years. They've helped plant over 2 million trees to expand our urban forest, and their focus is on community building through volunteering, education, and just tree planting. I'm with the Odditree Society. We're really focused on peculiar trees and observing peculiar trees and sort of celebrating trees as individuals. And this workshop is about observing trees and storytelling in a nutshell. So Tree Folks and the Odditree Society sort of came together to share this with you. And this is still a new format for us, so there may be a few bumpy spots, but we have test run this, so hopefully we worked out most of the bugs. So I want to start with our more objective assignment. There was a little homework assignment that some of you may have got. I don't know if you registered at the last minute, maybe you didn't get it, but we invited you to look at aerial views of your house and your neighborhood if you were in Austin. And if you weren't in Austin and you're somewhere else, trying to use Google Street View and Google Earth to sort of look at your canopy from above. I don't know how many of you were able to do that. If you did do that, what were some of your discoveries or observations, or did any sort of mysterious things stick out to you? If you want to just raise your hand by using a reaction. Beverly, do you want to unmute yourself and share?
Yes, the land I'm on has been stable from 1940 to now in terms of the canopy. I think maybe the one tree is thinning. It's getting older, so it's thinning, but maybe that's not so visible on the Google Maps. And the big change in my neighborhood, and it's pretty stable in terms of the canopy, but Travis Heights Elementary took out it was there in 1940, but then it's taken out a swath more of trees since then.
For playground or
just more buildings. It was a smaller school in 1940. And then it just got like those little portable classrooms and other things. It's just it's footprint is significantly larger.
Interesting.
And I know there's going to be another change. There's this beautiful wooded area at the corner of Alta Vista and Mariposa. It's like this wild forest in there. It was actually thinner in 1940, but more recently, it's just like, it is like solid. It is like it was a wild place. And now their trees were put ribbons on them, and then there's construction is starting in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you. That was great to explore like that.
Oh, sorry.
Stefan? Is it Stefan?
Sorry, it's Alicia. I'm actually using for some reason. I used my computer and it just put me into his account. I just realized. Hi, everyone. So my neighborhood, I found it interesting that I knew it had been farmland previously and was started being developed in like probably around the 60s or 70s, but we weren't completely sure. And I had assumed there were a lot more trees, and then the development of it would have destroyed that, but it was the reverse. There was almost no trees in the whole area, and then as homes were built, trees were planted. So our backyard, which is a really deep lot, has a bunch of wild growth, trees that grow tall and then fall over. So I guess they just didn't plant, and then that's what sprang up naturally in our deeper backyard. But there's just a massive amount of canopy that happens, sometime in the mid to late 70s. It just goes from nothing to kind of everywhere. So I thought that was really interesting.
Cool.
Unexpected.
Who else? Chelsea.
Hi.
Hi.
So I decided to look at my parents' house, and they live close to the coast. I'm in Florida because I was interested. That's a house I've known my whole life. So I figured that might be something that I might have some memories attached to the tree growth as well, at least in my 30-some years memory. And it was really cool because where they live, there's been a lot of hurricanes. So instead of seeing like trees, seeing it get increase or decrease, there's a lot of fluctuation in the tree growth.
Hurricanes.
Which is really cool to look at. I tried my own neighborhood here. I live in Gainesville, and it stayed pretty steady. Gainesville is a pretty tree heavy city. Lots of big oaks and stuff like that. So that stayed pretty consistent compared to the coastal cities.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so.
Anyone else? I will, I might just share my screen and share something. Oh, Ish, what do you have?
Hi, I'm in East Austin, and the most surprising thing that I saw was that my lot from 1965 to 1975, when I was doing the aerial view, I realized that it had become a small grove or jungle. And then my house was built, or not my house, but whatever came next came not till 1987 or so, depending on if the aerial view from 1984 it was kind of hard for me to see. But it seemed like this particular lot on the corner of 10th and Lincoln stayed pretty wooded. And it was pretty amazing to see that it just somehow in 1965, whatever was there before had been taken out to allow for this like mini grove in East Austin. So that was pretty cool. That was the most interesting thing that I noticed.
Cool. I'm going to share my screen to show something actually from Ish's neighborhood that came out of our pilot workshop. Let's see. Let me navigate there. Is that coming up? Maybe not. Still learning here. One more try. Here it is. Can you all see that?
It's at least working on my screen.
Okay. So Ish lives somewhere over here, but last time we did this, someone lived over here, and this was part of their exploration, and we noticed these two giant trees from 1940 that just jump off the image. So we became really curious about them. So some of us who live nearby went to explore some of them, and those are, let me see if I can share. Can you see my screen, Colin? Oh,
You're good.
You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, so these are the trees today, and they are giant, but it appears they were giant back in 1940. And it was interesting to note, I think these are on 10th and Harvard, or near 10th and Harvard. So they've just been growing ever since. And I mean, the image on the right, it's practically overtaken the house next door. Like, it's in the lot adjacent to this house in the foreground. And one of our questions or mysteries was, when we were looking at this in the aerial view, it kind of looked like a gateway, like these trees were almost planted symmetrically across the street from one another. So, I mean, we don't have an answer, but we were like, oh, did someone plant these intentionally as an entranceway? Or did these two rogue trees just grow up by themselves, like sort of simultaneously in these spots that look kind of intentional? So let's see. That was just sort of an exercise exploring a way we can objectively explore our neighborhood, like at arm's length, like not firsthand. And that's why we sort of call it the OverStory, and we're kind of looking at the canopy. So now we're going to sort of zoom in and get into the UnderStory portion, which is the bulk of the workshop. Let's see. Conceptually, this workshop is about paying attention to trees, and it's really, the bulk of it is focused on observation, and sort of the idea is that paying attention has benefits, and we can see more and feel more connected if we're paying attention. And this workshop is an excuse to pay attention to one tree in particular. And we'll get into choosing that tree in a second, but literally we have a week from this meeting to our closing meeting. And these online parts are very short. It's really about using your own time to go observe this particular tree that you're going to choose over the course of the week. So we have seven full days. So you're going to spend, hypothetically, if you want, 6 days in observation mode, and leave that 7th day for a way to sort of process your observations into a final product that's sort of open-ended and up to you. We'll show examples of that soon. But it's really focused on observation and looking more closely at this one particular tree. Like, we don't often get to tune into a single tree. I feel like we're often experiencing parks and forests, but here we want to sort of zoom in and focus on our subjective experience of this particular tree. And there's a few little concepts that I want to cover related to this briefly. One of those is ground truth. That is a sort of a cartographic term. It's used in different contexts, but I'm using it cartographically. And it's sort of what you witness firsthand. It's like your lived experience. So looking at those aerials, that was like the opposite of ground truth. And what we're about to embark on is sort of finding the ground truth. That's what your observations are. Another thing we're going to think about is an awareness plan. We're going to give you an awareness plan, but you're totally encouraged to manipulate and change that if you need to. And an awareness plan, sort of a concept developed by a psychologist, Herbert Neff, in the 80s. And it's just, an awareness plan is a way to frame your experience and your perspective. And this framework you create or choose informs your experience and your perspective, or in our case, our observation. So the awareness plan we're sort of working with is the idea in its most general sense is like tree as place. Like we don't often think of trees as places we visit. Maybe the treaty oak is certainly a tree as we often visit or tourists might go to, but we kind of want to think about any tree as a place to visit. So our framework is sort of like a city guide or a travel guide to a tree. That's what we're going to use as our awareness plan. But as I say, you're welcome to subvert that if you need to or want to. And the last concept is sit spot, which if you're a naturalist, you're probably familiar with this. It's the practice of choosing a place and visiting that place and spending time in that same place through the months and years and observing. It's a way to heighten your awareness because you see these things evolve over time, whether it's species or plants. So we're sort of using a version of this when we pick this tree. And what creates our sit spot is the tree, but the boundary of this territory that we're going to explore is basically the tree's canopy. So we pick the tree and then the sort of edge or the perimeter is created by the tree's canopy itself. So that is more or less the territory we're working in. So how you choose to create your methodology or your sit spot for this, I'm not saying you need to go there and sit there for a half hour every day in the same spot, but you could. You could say, go for 5 minutes a day every day. It's really up to your schedule and what's comfortable for you, but I would recommend having at least 5 sessions with your tree of any length. And I would recommend going for sure at different times of day. One of the exciting things for me was to go at night with a flashlight, and that sort of had its own revealing aspects. Then say high noon where the light is really harsh. I could see different things when I went at night because there were different things there and the lighting revealed different things. So now we're going to watch a short video about how we might choose this particular tree we're talking about. So let's see. If you have any audio issues with this, like send me a note or wave your hand. Here goes. Here's my backyard. I'm just going to run through a few options of trees I'm considering studying or choosing. Here we have a tall, it's pretty compact, old western red cedar, I think. It's got a pretty active insect situation on its bark, some fun residents, I think, and an interesting understory. It's a compact understory, but it's got a huge buildup of its own sort of juniper berries and needles, which I think is interesting. Over here, we just have your regular old hackberry, pretty young tree, compact canopy, very accessible, leaves that I can reach and look at. Some fun little fungal colonies popping up underneath it. And hackberries, you know, they're kind of demonized, but they do provide shade and they do have really awesome bark. Here's a bodark tree, known for its really dense wood and its crazy crab, horse apples that it produces in the fall. Also really accessible, has some sprouts coming out of the bottom. So that's kind of interesting to observe. And then a sort of peek into its inner wood, because the bark was sort of scraped off here for some reason. Also an interesting option. Over here we have a post oak that was pushed over when it was young. I don't know if it was a natural disaster or a man-made thing where someone just kicked it, but it has grown sideways for most of its life. And this provides a very deep, long canopy cover situation. So if that's my territory, it's got decomposed granite, some half-heartedly mowed grass, and then it goes over the fence to sort of a more wild zone
that's unmowed and unkempt, which I'm kind of curious about. It's also got really low branches, which makes the leaves easy to observe. I think this is going to be my tree.
So just reviewing some things to consider when picking a tree. First and foremost, which the video didn't really cover, but we want to emphasize, is choosing something in your immediate yard or very close to home. Make sure you feel comfortable observing at this location. Like I'm working with a tree in my backyard, so I can go out there at night with a flashlight and no one's going to see me and no one's going to care. If I was doing that in the front yard, my neighbors might be like, what's she doing over there? And maybe you don't care about that, but that's just something to think about. And beware of poison ivy in and around tree trunks, because it's high season right now for poison ivy and it's just popping up everywhere. So I'll show a picture of it in a moment, but keep that in mind as well. Accessibility is a big thing. Can you observe the trunk, the leaves, and the understory area comfortably? Like, you don't need a ladder or a drone or a weed whacker to get to things. Size is something to consider. A large wide canopy means more territory to explore, and a smaller canopy might lead to less area and therefore more focused exploration. And each has its pros and cons. Like, I chose a large tree that was very old and it had a lot going on. It was actually a complex thing to document fully. So, I mean, it has, again, benefits and drawbacks. And this kind of points to complexity too. So how diverse is the understory? Is it mowed grass, raw earth, or something more untamed and unmowed? Is it a younger tree or is it an older tree? Older trees, to me, from what I've observed, tend to have a lot more going on and inhabitants that have sort of built up over time. And younger trees tend to be a little less quirky, but I wouldn't say that would be a reason to rule out looking at a particular tree. So those are just some things to think about, but we really want to emphasize safety, and that's sort of the whole crux of this workshop, was organized around safety and what it means. What can you do with shelter in place? So now we're going to get into some examples. Let's see. Ooh, okay. Here's the poison ivy. If you see a tree like this, go the other way. There's no approaching such a situation. Like, hopefully you don't have this situation in your yard or near you, but yes, please avoid poison ivy. Okay, examples. I'm going to start with some really general examples that are not related to this project, and then we'll close or wrap up with some specific examples that were done in response to this prompt. So here's a Barton Springs postcard. It's sort of a scavenger hunt. It's not super site specific, but it's kind of site specific, and it definitely highlights things you'll find in this place. Because we really want to think of these trees as, again, places worth visiting. And if you were going to communicate like what you should sightsee here at this tree, like this would be one way you could frame it, as a scavenger hunt. This is just a page from a pedestrian guide of walks in Portland, Oregon, but you see it sort of gives you some direction on where to find things, and then some ideas of things to do once you're there. Really simple idea. This is, a map of sorts, but it's purely just text, and it's working off a street grid, which you will not have the luxury of a street grid for a tree. But if you may be inclined to draw something, you may be inclined to write something. If you're more of a writer, I mean, there's plenty of options for creating a guide to a tree through text. What else? This is a map of a bike trip on the Walnut Creek Trail. So this was just like an hour or two bike ride, and I just sort of took data along the way and put the data on the right-hand side, and then a map of where these things were found on the right. Pretty simple, didn't take much time, and I basically took the bike ride and then sort of condensed all these observations I took along the way immediately after. This is a little more abstract. This is a poem or an event score, it's often called, by Yoko Ono from the book Grapefruit. It's called Map Piece, and it's not site specific, but it's sort of like a set of directions for you to act on when you will just follow them, and it could actually give you an experience, which I think is interesting. There's actually a whole book of these, but I think you could sort of tailor this to an experience of a specific tree if you wanted to. And we're going fast through these, but again, they'll be in the Google Drive folder after if you want to look more closely. This is sort of like a collage map of a 7-day trip to the Yucatan. Again, there's some data on the left-hand side, a map sort of in the upper right-hand area, and then some more detailed images of cenotes, which I thought were really fascinating. So if I were going to go to the Yucatan, I could base some of my experiences off this map or go looking for things based on this map. Now we're going to get into some project-specific examples that came out of our pilot workshop. And one thing I want to note is that it's very different to hear about these examples without the person who made them describing them. That's actually half, I think, the enjoyment is the descriptions that go along with these, but we're just going to look at the resulting images in this case. But when we presented them, we had whoever made them spoke about them a little bit. So they were a little more, they had more depth to them. Anyway, this is a watercolor series of the octo cedar that really gets into a lot of detail. And again, you can see like a perspective sketch in the little diagram in the lower corner. It gets into the detail of like this sort of, I don't want to say leaves because it's not a leaf, but the evergreen needles and the berries, a map of the larger area that it falls in, a random tree that got in the mix. Again, more context around this tree, which is interesting. And then possibly some babies from it. And this was done in Word. So drawings were just photographed and put in a Word document and some text was added. And then some inhabitants that you would find there. So that's one example. This is an example from Amy Schofield. She chose to observe a honey mesquite near her house. And she wrote it in the form of reviews, like it was an inn, and people who stayed at the inn had different experiences. So again, we're not going to look too long at this, but there were actually like all kinds of things living in and around this tree, which was really fascinating. And the most exciting part were the stink bugs that were hatching on a branch. Also a Word document with photographs. This is another project, and it sort of takes some data and research into it, like all the names, the technical names and the casual names for this gumbelia tree, some of its uses. She used iNaturalist to sort of dig deeper into sort of the genetic history of the tree. And this is sort of like her map. So if you were there and you wanted to actually explore the tree, she's directing you to some particular spots to look at. And then looking sort of more scientifically at the tree parts with this little diagram. The last few examples are my own of the horizontal tree in my yard. Here I chose to just draw it and then pick 5 points of interest and highlight those below. So again, you could come to this tree with this little image and you could explore these little microcosms within the tree. Here is something that was influenced by the Yoko Ono map piece. These are sort of invitations from the tree to engage with it that were also part of my explorations. So another way of looking at it. And then the last example, let's see, is I came across a tourist video for this town in Japan, and it was like a 1-minute long video of just scenery, and I felt like that makes me want to go there and visit. So I was inspired to do a little video as well on the same tree. So that's just trying to like give you a range, but I want to emphasize the meat of this workshop is about just spending time with this tree over the course of the week and focusing on that rather than your output. Like, I would love to see what you make, or like some sort of capturing of your observations, but it's not mandatory. I think it feels really good to sort of make the observation and capture it in a way that's communicatable to other people. I think that's fun. But I don't want to emphasize that part. I want to emphasize like going out to the tree regularly and looking at it at different times of day. And, you know, whether you sit for a long time, like I started taking, since I'm working from home now, I would do Zoom calls or Zoom meetings sitting next to the tree so I could sort of observe the animal life that starts to come back in after you've sat there for a while. I think the rule is you need to sit somewhere for 20 minutes before animals ignore you. If you just come out into a space, things are more likely to scatter. But if you're sitting there and they come back, they won't be bothered by you. So, I mean, it doesn't sound great to be on a Zoom call while you're observing your tree, but it still has benefits. So think of ways you can integrate your sit time with the tree into your routine. And think of it as a break. Like if you're working from home and you need to stretch, like go take a look at your tree and stretch. And it is about the story and your experience and the subjectivity and what you want to say. Like maybe you're going to take it in a more fictional direction, or maybe you want to go in a more scientific route and dig into some research online from your observations. That's fine too. What I'm saying is it's pretty open-ended, but if you want to draw a box around it and say, I'm going to make a travel guide with 5 points of interest for this tree, that is fine too. So I want to just open it up to questions, but know that all this will go online. We'll have an outline that's in the Google Doc of everything we talked about, but it's really about what feels good to you, and hopefully observing a tree feels good to you. But if anyone has any questions, you can either raise your hand with your reaction or shoot it through chat. No question?
It looks like she has a question.
Okay, Ish, what's your question?
Is there a way for us to see everybody's kind of process as this goes along? Is there a Google group or a Google Hangout? I was confused about that.
Yes, we have. It's hard to find a platform that accommodates everyone. But we have a little Facebook page for the group that everyone can share to, because I think it is fun to have dialogue throughout the week, see what other people are seeing. So there's that. Or if you're not on Facebook, I believe you can still Colin, this is a question for you. Can you access the Facebook page? Is it public?
It's public, so you should be able to see it still. Yeah.
So if you can't post to it because you're not on Facebook, you could email anything to me and I'll post it immediately. That's sort of our best solution. We also have the Google Drive where next week by 9 a.m., if you've produced something, then you'd upload it to the Google Drive. So ideally it's there an hour before we meet, so you can sort of start to peruse what other people discovered. And then during that last meeting, we'll have, I think we don't have a ton of time, but say have 4 people share who are interested in sharing their experiences of the tree exploration. But we also have some hashtags, and there's like, I didn't even get into like, maybe you start an Instagram for your tree, an Instagram feed, and that's your medium. That's you can type notes in there. It's very straightforward. Or there's tools for like audio walking tours. I'll put that in a follow-up email as well if you just want to do a recording of an exploration of the tree. So I feel like it's very, sky's the limit with media, but I want to experience your experience of this tree somehow. So Google, the Facebook page will probably be the main sharing platform, even though I know it's Facebook and it's not perfect. Matthew, did you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. I did try to do an amateur tree survey of my yard a couple weeks ago. And I was wondering if you guys recommend, in addition to iNaturalist and the Texas A&M Forest Services page, a good resource for trying to identify your trees, because it's always so embarrassing when you think it's like a
Western red cedar.
Yeah, exactly. And I have made lots of mistakes before, so.
Colin, I'm going to defer to you.
There we go. So, sorry, I was looking out for the Facebook group to get y'all a link to that. If you want, and if you have questions on how to identify a tree, feel free to email me. I've put my email in the chat box. I will need pictures of the leaves. That's really the best. Also, pictures of the twigs and bark help too. Other than that, if you'd like to try and figure it out yourself, we are working on getting our tree key put online right now, but it isn't quite yet. There is a website that Texas A&M has that is pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think if you don't know your Texas trees very well, I am surely down to help. So that's probably
Well, thank you very much.
Other questions?
I do want to emphasize to everyone that y'all are going to get a follow-up email after this recording. That's going to have way more instructions for the next Zoom meeting and everything. So.
And you can email me any questions, but it's really like, have fun. And hopefully you have some good weather. Hopefully you have some bad weather. Hopefully you see a whole range of things.
And we have a few more questions in the chat. Do you recommend keeping a bird feeder on the tree?
That's interesting. Like, I started to explore interactive things where I would put out a stone for a few days and see if anything would start to like occupy, like bugs would crawl under it. I thought I found a bunch of dead snail shells, so I arranged them to take a photograph, and I did, and then I came back the next day and they were gone. Like 90% of them were gone, so they weren't actually dead. So I'm not opposed to putting something out there that informs your observations in a more interactive way. I think that's fine. I lost track of the chat.
There's another question asking if anyone in the pilot picked a young tree and maybe regretted it, or if anyone wished they had picked a different tree.
I think anyone regretted their trees. Yeah. I think everyone was really happy with their trees. I mean, I had my regrets that I was really excited about the complexity of my tree, but then I was like, how do I really just needed to narrow my observations to like, maybe I just want to look at the bugs living on this tree, but the textures and the different ground surfaces, I mean, they were all really fun. I think you just have to be okay with not capturing everything if you're going with a more, and oaks are very much a host species for lots of other critters. So in some ways that was also a motivator for me. I'm like, well, there's gotta be a lot going on in this tree. It was just more than I could take in at certain points. So, but you don't have to document everything. So, and a young tree, I mean, they have their whole lives ahead of them. If you want to build a long-term relationship with a tree, start young. You can watch it through the years. And this is just a week exercise, but I like to think that you'll observe this tree more closely maybe over time beyond this workshop if you can. So other questions?
So there's another question, which was, what was the first overarching concept that you started with? So they got to the sit spot part, but I was wondering what came before that.
Let's see. I think it was the ground truth. Was that it?
Yeah, ground truth.
Yeah, just thinking cartographically speaking, we started with this very objective looking down with photographs, and we're sort of coming into this like firsthand experience, which is factual in its own way, but it's also very subjective. And I want to say like there's beauty in that subjectivity, and we're not trying to make a perfect picture of this place. We're trying to make a very personal picture of this place. So I was just using ground truth to talk about that empirical experience.
And there's another question asking if you recommend spending time only on the ground or going up in the canopy some too.
We're not recommending tree climbing. I started clipping my iPhone to a long board and swinging it around the canopy in slow-mo mode so I could get a closer look at things up there, but that's very dangerous for your phone. So I'm not going to recommend that, but I definitely won't recommend climbing. I mean, I was tempted to get out a ladder and get up there for a better look, but I would say just think about accessibility in its natural form where you don't need any special accessories to look at the leaves.
And also, we're trying to make a travel guide to get other people to come here, so maybe not everyone could climb. Like, you could go up in the canopy for a few things, I would say, but if you can do it safely.
Or binoculars, I mean, or a telescope, that would be really cool. Or like thinking of other tools, if you have a magnifying glass. Oh my gosh.
Also, in the beginning workshop, we had someone found a tree that was really laying on its side that they could kind of walk up to the canopy, and that ended up being really good.
That was me, I think.
Oh, that was you, yeah.
Yeah, you literally could walk into the canopy on this tree, which I still fell out. I'll be honest, I fell out of the tree, but it was like 3 feet. So, yeah. I mean, the choice is up to you. We're just not going to recommend climbing. So, yeah. Did I miss any questions?
None that I saw. If anybody has a question that we missed, if you'll use like a reaction thing on your screen so we'll see it, that'd be great. I think we're good. All right.
Great work, guys. Not too many technical difficulties. Thank you for your patience and your participation. I can't wait to see what you all come across. We'll send you a follow-up email within the next hour that sort of has links and details, and hopefully you can go find your tree. Thank you all.
All right, thank y'all. See y'all later. Bye.
Thanks, Ann. Bye, y'all.